Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We're using the Johnson edition. We turn to poem 179, If I Could Bribe Them by a Rose. It's going to be a fascinating poem. Another poem about longing. Another poem that doesn't actually tell us what the situation standing behind the longing is. Some have read this poem as Emily talking about her poetry, about the longing that she has to be accepted in her poetry, maybe as Sam Boyle's. Others have seen this as more relational, and it's about Sue and Austin, her brother, and having something to do with that. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already exposed yourself to the set of introductory comments, and as well that you've already studied with us the previous 178 poems. We just finished with I Cautious Scan. If you have done that, and I hope they have, then you already know that here by poem 179, we've heard these kinds of sentiments before. And as well, her use of the word yes here, which will take us back to poem 172. If I could bribe them by a rose, I'd bring them every flower that grows from Amherst to Kashmir. I would not stop for night or storm or frost or death or anyone, my business were so dear. If they would linger for a bird, my tambourine was soonest heard among the April woods, unwearied all the summer long, only to break in wilder song when winter shook the boughs. What if they hear me? Who shall say that such an importunity may not at last avail, that weary of this beggar's face, they may not finally say yes to drive her from the hall? Now, this notion of driving her from the hall, I think, is significant, because everything is hinging upon what we call in our Shakespeare study the vague antecedent. Do you guys remember in our study of Hamlet that Gertrude, for example, will say, I do not wish to speak with her, and the audience immediately goes, who, her, who? Oh yeah, we're talking about Ophelia. Shakespeare loves to do this. I think Emily learned how to make these references through pronoun usage to someone or something. And it's unclear. We have to kind of figure it out. Clearly, whatever is going on here, it has something to do with Emily's longing to be accepted, understood. Notice the if I could formulation to begin. 11 poems, by the way, she plays this game, if I could. If I could bribe them by a rose, and of course we know the significance of roses already in our study of Emily's poetry. If I could bribe them, I'd bring them every flower that grows from Amherst to Kashmir. Obviously the end rhyme matters here. I would not stop for night, notice the list here, storm, frost, death, or anyone. And then she says, my business were so dear. Business here, are we talking relational? Are we talking poetic? I like to read this as poetic. I think that's her point. Business as in the bribe and business. In other words, I just wish I could be somehow I could be heard in the hall, and of course hall being capitalized at the end of the poem. It takes us back in our study of Walt Whitman, when we did all the poems of Leaves of Grass. We call that series Talks with Walt. Do you guys remember in the inscriptions poems early on that several times Whitman as well said that he longed to stand on the shelves next to others, and I think the hall here is the same thing. By the way, this formulation of so dear, my business were so dear, I cannot help but make the connection to Thoreau's Walden. Do you remember it? I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts, and see if I could learn what nature had to teach. And not when I came to die discovered that I had not lived. What does he say? Living is so dear. It's amazing to me that these two writers are contemporaries and they use a formulation like this, so dear. Her business is so dear. If, she continues, they, whoever they is, would linger for a bird. Notice now we go from flowers to birds. And these are the two symbols of Emily's poetry. In many ways, the primary symbolism goes between these two polarities of birds and flowers. My tambourine, the only use in all of her poetry here, were soonest heard among the April woods. Notice it's not the October woods, the April woods. And then she uses the word unwearied, because later it's going to be weary in this poem. Unwearied all the summer long, only to break in wilder song. And again, I cannot help but make the connection to Whitman here with Song of Myself and his idea that poetics is always about singing, right? In wilder song, when winter shook the boughs, Of course, we go from spring, April to winter. And then the questions without the question marks. What if they hear me? Who shall say that such an importunity may not at last avail? One last chance, we might say, that weary of this beggar's face. Who's she talking about? Publishers? Possibly Sam Boyles. Weary of this beggar's face. Notice it's beggars, longing for acceptance. They, one more time, may not finally say yes. Back to poem 172. It's unusual for her to do this. To drive her from the hall. In other words, just to shut her up, we accept her poetry. Fine, 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 fine. At 2a, I think the message here is that all great artists long for understanding, if not acceptance. At 2b, I love the vague antecedent, and I think she did learn it from her study of Shakespeare. At 3a, do you guys remember when we did our study of Dante's Divine Commedia? You'll remember, and all of that is posted at learnstrong.net. Do you guys remember that in Limbo, when Dante shows up, Dante the Pilgrim shows up, do you remember that there's all those great poets that are there kind of in a group, and Dante comes up? It's clear that Dante, the poet, longs for the kind of acceptance that would put him in the same category as Homer and Virgil and the like. Of course, I believe that it's fair for us to do that today, yes. Finally, at 3b, to own a poem like this, what was a time when you felt misunderstood? A time when you longed to be in the hall, to at least be appreciated, if not understood, at least appreciated. I hope that you are appreciating Emily's work. Thank you.